hey, that's your final answer?
Well, we have had a very tough last month or so, and there has been a significant surge in COVID cases, both in Texas and throughout the United States. This is the third surge. Remember, we started the shutdown last March with the initial surge of the virus, and things were pretty catastrophic. And there was a fear that we'd run out of hospital beds and there'd be people, dying in the streets and so forth. So in any event, we got through that. There's still quite a bit of debate about whether that was successful, given that the COVID spread has continued at a fairly rapid pace. We then had a second unexpected surge during summer 2020, which didn't overrun the hospitals, but caused a lot of concern in states like New York and California implemented some fairly punitive policies, which again are still being examined, effectiveness of these policies. In any event, fast to fall. And I'm not sure that we ever had really a break between a first surge, second surge, third surge, but clearly we're in a surge right now, which frankly is on par with the surge that we had at the beginning of 2020 or early 2020. And it's obviously a very sad situation. And the report was yesterday, we topped 15,000 new cases here in the state of Texas. So there's different parameters that are used, and I'm not going to repeat the statistics because I haven't written them down to repeat them. But in any event, they use certain parameters to determine if the situation is at a crisis level. And what we're being told is that either today or tomorrow, given the current surge, that Governor Abbott, who is a Republican and a conservative, may implement some fairly strict public controls, like closing the bars again, pushing the restaurants down to 50%. Frankly, I thought the restaurants were still at 50%. But in any event, this would be interesting because it is Republican governor, and there's been a lot of criticism of Democrat governors who have shut their states down, like New York and California. So it's, I think it's somewhat of a desperation play. It gets a little bit worse, and that is that we didn't set a record for travel this Christmas, New Year's holiday. We had about 1 million less travelers than we did a year earlier during the holiday season, but that is still a very large number of people. And what we do know is that the number one way that COVID is spread is by gatherings, like family gatherings for holidays and things like that. You only need one person in that gathering to infect everybody else, and then they infect everybody else, and you have what's called a super spreader event. So an individual family gathering isn't a super spreader event in itself, but if you have tens of thousands of family gatherings, each one of which might have an infected individual, then you get into some really tough circumstances. So unfortunately, I think that there may be some further moves ahead. Now, in terms of looking long term, I think that we're probably hopefully, and I'm going to talk in another segment about the vaccine situation, but I think we're looking at about another 6 months. And it reminds me of Groundhog Day. We're about a month off from Groundhog Day. And remember, if he sees his shadow, is 6 more weeks of winter. And I think I'm going to be the groundhog today and say we've got about 6 more months of difficulty with COVID at a minimum before we have some type of breakthrough.
Wow. Well, hopefully that means we can at least see a light at the end of the tunnel, right?
At that 6 months.
It may not be close, but we can see it. So that's great.
Absolutely.
And we are hearing of people occasionally who have received the vaccine. So we know it is being distributed and people are getting it. So it's just not happening as fast as we would all like for it to happen.
Absolutely.